Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, opposition figures in Somalia accuse security forces of attacking them at a meeting at the former PM's house. The capital is racked by gunfire in clashes amidst tensions sparked by critics of current President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, who accuse him of trying to stage a power grab. Also, critics of an African family values conference say that despite its purported push for the continent to be the one that defines its own moral principles and priorities, the gathering in Ghana will actually roll back LGBTQ plus gender and reproductive rights and is heavily supported by US conservative groups. We get our breakdown from our correspondent in Accra. And Nigeria's National Museum draws new generations of visitors to a revamped gallery, encouraging a more hands-on experience. The echoes of the past exhibition showcases some of the country's most important historical treasures. But for the first time in years, people living in Somalia's capital endured a night of gunfire. On Thursday, Somali opposition supporters clashed with security forces in Mogadishu for a second day.
We were sleepless all night because of the sound of the machine gun fire and explosions. You see, I'm exhausted because of it. The fighting has affected us, both children and adults.
I
call on the government and the opposition to have dialogue and agree upon the elections.
Now, the unrest underscores growing political tensions in the country and came amidst plans for an anti-government demonstration on Thursday. Now, all of this has been sparked by constitutional reforms brought in March, meant to set the ground for the country's first direct national elections. But critics of President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed say that they are, in fact, a power grab. Opposition figures had planned to demonstrate against the government on Thursday, but say that security forces attacked residences linked to the country's former PM and president. Gunfire had reportedly died down by Thursday afternoon. Our regional correspondent, Bastien Renouy, breaks down the complexity of the power struggles for us.
This fighting is not an exception. It's more a recurring pattern in Somalia's electoral cycle. Already in 2021, before the last election, fighting broke in Mogadishu. You know, for the past 10 years, the Somalian politicians have been trying to implement a new electoral system, a one-person, one-vote system, which has not happened since 1969. At the moment, the clans, which are the groups that are organizing the society and the politics of Somalia, are in charge of voting for members of parliament, and then these MPs elect the president. But the current president, Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, wants to change that. He wants a one-person, one-vote system, and that's where there is a disagreement between the government and the opposition.
I think the issue about electoral models fundamentally comes down to control. So the government has unveiled this one-person, one-vote model, but it is a model that they've had significant influence over, that they've influenced the design, implementation of, and so those in opposition aren't comfortable with that. They feel it gives them a very strong advantage. You know, if you don't get to some sort of compromise, I'm sure we're going to have episodes like this again in the future. So certainly, I think what happens today will impact the future trajectory of elections, you know, where we get them, how we get to them, and so on.
And indeed, life in Mogadishu is very militarized. When you travel in the city, you can see men with guns everywhere, including private militias. And opposition members do not trust the army and the police to protect them, so they hire private militias to travel across the country, across the city, and to protect them during demonstrations. So this militarization of the society can lead to the tensions we've seen in the past days. According to my sources in Mogadishu, several soldiers were killed during the clashes, as well as several civilians.
Bastien Renouy there for us. Now, following a meeting with his Kenyan counterpart, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced plans to send envoys out to other countries on the continent to work on taking a more coordinated approach to migration. Attacks on foreigners are a recurring problem in South Africa, where immigrants are often blamed for economic woes such as high unemployment and crime. Ramaphosa says that despite the recent violence, his countrymen are not xenophobic and the continent has to pull together to tackle migration.
South Africa is not the only country that is facing the challenge of migration, and we want to learn from how others have dealt with it and how they've dealt with the intricate problems that we are dealing with. South Africa has become an oasis of people who want to come here for a whole number of reasons. We need to be working with all other sister countries to see how best this challenge is resolved in the interests not only of South Africans, but in the interests of various other countries too, as well on our continent.
Now, Ghana is hosting the 4th African Interparliamentary Conference on Family Values. Now, this a week after the country passed a punitive bill criminalising LGBTQ activities. Now, the country's Speaker of Parliament opened the conference, which is happening inside the parliamentary chamber, saying that Ghana is being blackmailed by Western countries with aid money to stop it from protecting its traditional values. On the other hand, human rights workers warn that the conference is a platform to push discrimination and roll back gender, sexual and reproductive and LGBTQ plus rights across the continent, and as part of a movement funded by US conservative actors, its top line actually is in contradiction to its background. Justice Baidu breaks it all down for us.
The Parliamentary Conference on African Values is happening in Ghana at a time when more and more countries on the continent are passing punitive laws to limit LGBTQ rights. The resolutions from this conference is expected to support the momentum for more countries to tighten anti-gay laws. This is a sensitive issue for many economies on the continent because countries like Uganda that have recently passed anti-gay laws reported an estimated 1.6 billion in losses to its economy only 12 months after these laws were passed. Participants who are attending this conference, however, say countries on the continent must damn the consequences.
It's important that as an African continent we take a defined, definite position, that we would come together to fight these forces that are looking to destroy us.
As long as the African leaders go capping and begging, that's why they are giving those terms. If not, if a country is on its own or on our own, managing its resources, working within its own limits, like some African countries are coming up to now. I mean, there wouldn't be any need for anybody to give you anything.
As a Malawian legislator, I'm participating for the first time. I'm loving the flow of the discussion. I think we need to realize that without the family, the future is doomed.
In Ghana, for example, persons within the LGBTQ community have consistently fought the idea that gay rights are foreign to Africans. Ghana only last week passed its own new set of laws that increases jail term for persons who identify as homosexuals and transgender people, and also those who advocate for their rights.
Well, Zimbabwe has secured a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council for the 2027 to 28 term, marking a significant diplomatic achievement for the country. Zimbabwe joins Austria, Portugal, Trinidad and Tobago as the newly elected non-permanent members who will take up their seats on the 1st of January next year. Zimbabwe takes over from Somalia when its term ends in December. Our Sharon Mazingayu tells us more.
For the next 2 years, Zimbabwe will have a seat at one of the most important decision-making bodies in the world, the UN Security Council. Zimbabwe, as a non-permanent member, secured 182 votes out of 191 in an election held at the UN General Assembly. For the Zimbabwean government, this win is a diplomatic success, but there are mixed reactions in Zimbabwe over this seat, critics accused the Zimbabwean government of human rights violation and poor governance, saying that the country holds short of standards of a UN Security Council. For Zimbabwe, this seat does not hold any veto power. The UN Security Council has 15 members, including 5 members that have veto power. But this seat is important for Africa. This is a table where peace, world peace, conflicts are discussed, and Zimbabwe becomes one of the 3 African countries on this table, joining the DRC, Congo, and Liberia. DRC, Congo, and Liberia were selected in 2025.
Well, Nigeria's National Museum in Lagos is drawing in a new generation of visitors after the unveiling of a ramped-up gallery, encouraging a more interactive experience. The renovated Echoes of the Past exhibition showcases some of the country's most important historical treasures. Take a look.
At Nigeria's National Museum in Lagos, history is getting a modern makeover. Visitors wander through the newly renovated Echoes of the Past gallery, exploring centuries of Nigerian heritage. Among the highlights are the ancient Ezi stone figures, the renowned Benin bronzes, and intricately carved elephant tusks from the historic Benin Kingdom. The redesign aims to make the museum more engaging and accessible, particularly for younger audiences.
When they come here, you see them taking pictures, and of course, now we are allowed to take pictures. In fact, we are allowed to handle these objects as against when you couldn't even touch. But now you are allowed to touch gently the objects. You are aligning with your cultural heritage.
One section of the exhibition carries a pointed message: British Museum, how far? A reference to the thousands of Nigerian artifacts that remain in foreign collections. For many visitors, the experience offers a fresh perspective on Nigeria's past.
I like the way the artifacts were displayed. I learned a lot of things actually as a Nigerian, where the artifacts were found, what they represent, and yeah, so it was really beautiful.
The museum says further renovations are planned as Nigeria prepares to welcome more returned artifacts and preserve its rich cultural legacy for future generations.
Wow, that looks so cool. That is, though, all we have time for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.